very much. Okay, continuing, I would like to remind why we're running this webinar. This is the first one of a series of 3, and the purpose of these webinars is to increase the understanding of why and how we need to get involved in supporting new ways of improving aquaculture sustainability. This new way of supporting sustainability, which is what we're discussing today, is called landscape-based management approach to aquaculture. The concept has been described and has been advocated by the FAO since 2007. And since then, several NGOs have been working on the ground to make that happen, and they have learned a great deal. So today, we're going to use a lot the words landscape or jurisdictional management and aquaculture improvement projects, also referred to as AIPs. So just to make sure that these words make sense to you and you are clear on the differences, we're going to run the second and last poll so that we know if we can provide more support in when we use these words, and we can explain them to you. So Paul is going to run the second poll.
No, not yet.
So here's the second poll, and the question is the difference between AIPs and landscape clear to you? So I'll just give you a few more moments to answer this. And just a couple more seconds. Okay, so share the results. So what we've got here is 13% very clear, a bit fuzzy, good phrase. There's 40% and not sure about it at almost 50%. So thanks for your question, answering those questions.
Okay, so yeah, these are not straightforward concepts really, and which is one of the reasons why we are running this. So what the way I can help you right now so that you can get through the webinars with the tools that you need to understand is that there's 2 things that you can that can help you very quickly. The first one is that when we talk about landscape management or jurisdictional management, we're really referring to more or less the same thing. So don't get confused or don't think that there are different things. It's the same. Some people use landscape-based management, some people jurisdictional, and both words will be used in these webinars. And then the second one is the words Aquaculture Improvement Project, or called AIP, which is the acronym for it. What an AIP is, this is a framework. So it's a step-by-step way of implementing the landscape-based management. So an aquaculture improvement project is a way to get there. It's a process. So this is the difference. They are achieving the same thing, but one is the concept and one is the way to get there. Okay, so I hope that very short introduction is going to help you to follow the presentations. Today, some of those NGOs that before I mentioned have been running these projects on the ground. They're with us here today, and they've all been involved in running big aquaculture improvement projects in Southeast Asia, and they will talk to us about what they've learned and why they're important. The speakers today are going to be Anton Imic from Think Aqua. Then we're going to have Jack Morales from the Asian Seafood Improvements Collaborative, and Dane Klinger from Conservation International. Okay, without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, who is Anton Imic, the CEO of Think Aqua, which is a global nonprofit delivering sustainability improvements for enhanced social, economic, and environmental outcomes, particularly for smallholder aquaculture farmers in developing countries. Think Aqua portfolio includes partnership projects in shrimp, carp, and tilapia in Asia, tilapia in Africa, and shellfish in Europe. So very welcome, Anton. The floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Elena. I presume everybody can see the big screen, the slides. So I'm going to talk briefly about some of the background about why we should be thinking big in shrimp improvement before Jack and Dane delve into a few more live examples. So some of you will know me from SFP originally, but now heading up this new organisation, Think Aqua. So in today's presentation, I want to run through some of the continued challenges for shrimp. I'm sure we're all very aware of them, but I think a refresher's always valuable. And to then think about why fixing those challenges requires action at scale. Delve into a few numbers to figure out where the leverage is, and then think about what coordinated action is needed, and hopefully what value it will bring to the sector. We are, of course, constantly reminded about the bad reputation of shrimp. But all the good things that we believe in, there are bad articles in the press around the continued concerns over impacts on mangroves, questions around antibiotic residues, and of course, the ongoing issues around repeated and recurring disease issues. I'm going to delve into the disease aspect in particular for a couple of seconds, just to try and put some numbers on the table. This is some work by Andy Shin and others from 2018, looking at the impact of AHP&D, or EMS, a major shrimp disease problem that has impacted most shrimp producing nations. So from about 2011, 2012, we saw significant declines in production. And that green ellipse on the right-hand side highlights in billions of dollars the cumulative impact of that single disease outbreak due to reductions in productivity primarily. So just adding those numbers up quickly, you get to more than $20 billion within 4 or 5 years of the outbreak. That's a significant cost to the industry. And in return, we haven't seen very much investment, certainly not on those comparable scales, to address many of the challenges that shrimp face. Delving a little bit deeper into what that means in kind of the economics of the shrimp that we buy, the price in Thailand rose by more than 2.5 times at the peak of the EMS outbreak. But we see to the right-hand side that the overall price has remained higher than it was pre-disease outbreak in Thailand, which affects the competitiveness of Thailand in the global market. And we know that buyers spread their risk by sourcing from multiple countries. But the overall impact, I think, remains obvious that the cost of shrimp continues to go up because we're not addressing these issues at scale. So there are lots of bits and pieces and hidden costs in the industry, reminding ourselves that supply chains are fragmented, both at the producer level and the aggregator level, through to the fact that there are many processors and buyers across the supply chain as well. And shrimp are farmed in essentially open systems, so we need to also recognise that there are ongoing challenges. We're not producing in mass systems everywhere at the moment, and it's probably too expensive to do that. So we have to deal with the fact that disease outbreaks probably remain in the industry for years to come. How do we deal with them? But also, the industry accepts that there is an ongoing a high level of mortality, and that's accepted as the norm. But these dead shrimp also cost money. They add to climate, to environmental footprints because of the wasted feed and energy, and drive up the market price without even making it to market. There are additional hidden costs. Many consuming markets also kind of export their footprint for the production of the food to producer countries. And I think we need to continue to consider how we take responsibility for addressing that. And obviously, we've had farm certification around for many years, and that provides some confidence. But we also understand that there are some limitations and challenges with the current model of farm certification. It's not reaching all farms, so it's slow to improve at scale. It's typically reached low-hanging fruit, the larger farms, better performing farms, but still hasn't reached smaller, poorer performing farms. It doesn't typically include regional disease risks as comprehensively as we believe they should be managed, or the environmental impact as well. Whereas we think a jurisdictional or landscape or zonal approach will enable improvements at scale. And by raising the general performance of an area will also create the enabling conditions for more certification. That could be farm certification, we could be looking at landscape level certification. It can support coordinated governance, and it increases the overall reputation of the industry. But we're not suggesting that you have to run out and fix all of the shrimp production of the world straight away. You know, if we take the broad estimate of 7 million tonnes, and we pick out the 5 main exporting countries of India, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Ecuador, we've got about 50% of production. Of that, 10% globally, about 20% in those 5 countries is certified. But again, that's mainly reaching the larger producers. What is exported, and I picked out the US and European markets here to demonstrate that, you know, even that is only accounting for about 40% of the overall production from these countries. But there's an opportunity to utilize that leverage to address the remaining production, price, supply, and reputational risks that remain in those countries. And I think that we could use that leverage from what we're currently sourcing, particularly in major export markets, to address the need for wider improvement. So what we would hope for is for action by all actors. So that means that farms have to do their bit, buyers, processors, and government. So the idea of a jurisdictional or landscape approach is that you get action at multiple levels, at multiple scales. So in terms of addressing disease risks, you know, hatcheries would have to work on potential technical fixes to produce better post-larvae. On-farm biosecurity issues would need to be addressed. We need to look at the access to diagnostic services, clear reporting and management by governments across whole landscapes of producers, and then believing that reducing disease impact will reduce cost and waste. If we look at environmental risks, that also needs to be dealt with through a governance process of better planning and permitting, but then better on-farm management of wastewater and stronger enforcement, and again, public reporting of impacts on public water quality. No single producer or packer, or certification process can address the volumes or institutions needed to solve these problems. So coordinated leverage, asks, and action, we believe, can address management across the sector. So if we think about the value of acting together, this should enable us to build or improve and protect the reputation of shrimp as a whole, to be more confident in the product, to improve the reputation of major producing countries, of supply chains, to give us pride in the product, basically, to feel confident and comfortable to put it on the shelves. Increasing jurisdictional landscape zonal management should increase the sourcing options as well, because there would be greater confidence in better performance of all farms. So hopefully addressing some of these risks and these stories that we see about mangrove destruction or antibiotic residues that aren't necessarily coming from the shrimp that we see on our shelves directly, if that's certified already, or there are some efforts in place to address what reaches our shelves. But we still suffer from a negative reputation. So if we can address that globally, that would also be valuable. And of course, this is my last point, Ellen. Yeah.
Minutes, yeah.
Thank you. If we take a further step back, a coordinated set of actions should hopefully enable us to address some of the wider issues, like carbon emissions potentially in a coordinated way, to reach the SDGs sooner and hopefully more strongly, of course, to restore mangroves and reduce the fragmentation in mangroves, and also potentially to increase climate resilience. So I hope that gives a little bit of framing, reasoning. I will hand back to Elena now to move on.
Thank you, Anton. That was a really informative presentation with a fresh angle. Okay, we're going to move to our second speaker, who is Jack Morales. He's from the ASIC, or the Asian Seafood Improvements Collaborative, and he will talk to us about his experience of how one of the aquaculture improvement projects he has been working on can increase market access, transparency, and compliance. Thank you, Jack. It's all yours.
Unmute myself. Okay, thank you very much, Elena. Good day, good evening, everyone. So I'll be talking about the aquaculture improvement program run by the ASEAN Seafood Improvement Collaborative in South Sulawesi, called the EcoStream AIP. The Asian Seafood Improvement Collaborative is a burgeoning regional collaboration between private sector stakeholders from the Southeast Asia, from Indonesia, Vietnam, Myanmar, Thailand, and the Philippines, to tackle the social and environmental sustainability challenges facing the ASEAN seafood industry. The collaboration was able to produce a number of standards on farming shrimp, social and gender, as well as the internal control system. And these standards are being used now to assess and verify aquaculture improvement projects. It's also helped the aquaculture improvement project to plan their activities. The AIP that we are implementing in the South Sulawesi aims to increase market recognition by responsible shrimp farming and verifying extensive shrimp farming against the ASIC shrimp protocol. This is composed of over 1,365 farmers from 3,000 hectares of farm, participated by several stakeholders, processing plant, farmers, hatcheries, input supplier, trader buyer, including local NGOs and government organization. Using the ASIC protocol, we were able to identify at least 4 major improvement activities for this AIP, which focus on changing the management practices, improving sourcing of inputs, engaging with key stakeholders, and also mapping the government agencies that can support the implementation of the improvement program and the policies as well. If the aquaculture improvement program able to address all of these issues, it could lead to a better farming practices with minimal social and environmental impact, and thereby getting a better access to market. Now, slide is not moving. Okay. Again, just to give you a detailed information on what we have found during the verification or gap analysis on each AIP that we are running. We have identified sustainability challenges covering the traceability, survival, sources of stock, climate change, including women economic empowerment. The traceability issue is one of the critical component of sustainability. As I mentioned a while ago, we have more than 1,300 farmers participating in this improvement program, so it's impossible to trace back to the original pond where the shrimp are coming from. So it's a major sustainability issue. And through the AIP, we provided improvement recommendation to address this issue. So, for example, organizing leaders in sourcing from the AIP members only, and building the capacity of farmers and traders in recording. Another important sustainability challenges in implementing AIP is the source of stock. there are several hatcheries available locally, but very few of them would declare or produce information where the stocks are coming from and what's the status of the stock. And this needs to be addressed as well. So part of the improvement program is for us to assist farmers in finding hatcheries that provides information on the sources of the stock. We facilitate in the discussion with local Department of Fisheries to establish a local hatchery and nursery. There are also issues on the climate change brought by, unpredictable weather condition that would result to unmanageable water quality, like increasing temperature or salinity, for example. So again, we seek, as part of the AIP improvement program, we seek assistance from government offices to help small-scale operators to address this climate change. In terms of women economic empowerment, it's very common that women have limited access to information and resources. Part of the AIP is to facilitate the creation of women group in the area for them to be able to access information and also the resources. Because there are some women in our group or in the South Sulawesi stream that are also managing their own farms. So as an AIP leader, there are several responsibilities or associated to being an AIP leader or an AIP implementer leader. So it goes from onboarding participants of the AIP, identifying stakeholders who will help in the implementation of the improvement recommendation, also provide technical assistance. This is ensuring that the improvement recommendation is being understood by the members, doing the assessment to ensure that all the indicators from the protocols are being addressed. So monitoring, and lastly is to provide a market access for those small-scale farmers. Take note that the South Sulawesi shrimp improvement program for Monodon is mainly for small-scale traditional farmers. So we would like to make sure that these small-scale farmers have access to market. Now, in terms of government support, there are already several government agencies supporting in the implementation of the Aquaculture Improvement Program in South Sulawesi. Their responsibility varies from providing technical assistance through training. We have invited several agencies already to provide training on specific topics that helps in the improvement of farming shrimp, assist in site inspection and monitoring, and then improve policies and regulation, as well as creating access to better input. Some of this government organization includes the Development Center for Brackish Water Aquaculture in Jepara, a Fisheries Office of East Java, and then the Meteorological, Climatological, and Geophysical agencies. So each agencies have different roles in the implementation of the Aquaculture Improvement Program in South Sulawesi. And just to give you an example, this is the output of our engagement with the Climatology Department, wherein they provided a climate change adaptation production schedule to our farmers, wherein it guides the farmer when to do a specific activity based on the available weather data that they have. This would help our farmers to plan efficiently and to avoid risk due caused by climatic conditions. So in making sure that the government is supporting our aquaculture improvement project, the lead implementer of our AIP, the PT Athena in particular, is in serious discussion to initiate collaboration with the Ministry Research Center for Marine Aquaculture in Takalar. And this is to establish a hatchery that would provide good quality PLs to those farmers involved in our AIP program. The main reason why we are initiating this is because one of the major problems that we found during our gap analysis in the verification is that the main cause of low survival for shrimp production are the available quality of PLs. So if we have good quality PLs, then it could potentially solve the problem. And also, as I mentioned a while ago, that there are some hatcheries that do not want to provide information about the sources of their brood stock or the status of their stock. Having this
Jack, sorry, 2 minutes warning.
yeah, I think this is my last slide. So have hatchery established by the ministry, it would help us provide or make the good quality post larvae available, and making sure that farmers can access those quality fingerlings. This setup will provide a good communicating channel between farmers and the government agencies as well, not only the fisheries, but other agencies as well in relation to shrimp farming. I think that's all of my presentation. Thank you very much, SFP, for allowing us to present this, and also Oxfam for funding the activity. Thank you.
Jack, thank you very much. It was really inspiring to learn how this project could mobilize such great resources to help small farmers accessing markets. It's a really nice story.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like then to introduce our third and last speaker, Dane Klinger from Conservation International. His story is going to help explain why better supply chain resilience cannot be achieved by the private sector alone, and why governance needs to be a critical part of an improvement project. So sometimes we can drive improvements when we focus on one very specific farm, which is big and has the resources to improve. But if we do want to leverage a much bigger portion of the sector, then the government, it's key. And Dane is gonna show us what they learned on their aquaculture improvement project in Indonesia. Welcome, Dane.
Thank you. And you can see my slides, correct?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about what we call the Shrimp Improvement Program, SIP, which in Bahasa Indonesian is slang for thumbs up. So thumbs up has become our informal gesture for the project. But it's a project based in Banyuwangi, East Java, Indonesia, and led on the ground by Conservasi Indonesia, Sustain Aqua Indonesia, and then supported by Conservation International and Think Aqua, and of course, in partnership with many others. But it really started back in 2017 when Conservation International worked with other NGOs, scientists, the government of Indonesia, to distill the FAO's ecosystem approach to aquaculture into actionable guidance for farmers. And when the report really highlighted that when you think about how to manage shrimp aquaculture beyond the single farm level, so when you start thinking about a whole jurisdiction, 3 things popped out as very important: spatial planning and zoning, water quality management, and coordinated disease management. So we built those into the backbone of our jurisdictional improvement project. And Anton shared this slide before, but I thought it was important just to bring it up again to really highlight the major reasons why jurisdictional approach improvement projects are so important for shrimp aquaculture. And that's, getting some farms certified on a landscape doesn't necessarily address the regional disease risks and the cumulative environmental impacts. But thinking at the whole jurisdictional level can help address some of those impacts. And disease is a major concern in the shrimp aquaculture sector, resulting in billions of dollars of losses per year during outbreaks. Also, when we looked at historical fishery improvement projects and historical aquaculture improvement projects, significant resources had been put into initiatives to drive governance and policy improvements, but those projects often had little engagement with markets. Similarly, there were lots of market-based approaches, projects that allocated resources for market-based approaches, but that had little engagement with producers and with policies. And we wanted to bring together market incentives and policy reforms to utilize the strengths of both. And there's been a lot of work utilizing both of these tools in terrestrial commodities, but not as much in seafood. So what does this all look like? The biggest thing has been engaging key actors at relevant scales. And so as we designed the project and focused on Banyuwangi Regency in East Java, we wanted to engage government at a level where they had autonomy and authority to meaningfully regulate and improve the shrimp sector. We wanted to engage at a scale that the supply chain could meaningfully become involved. Similarly, we wanted to engage at a level where producers were organized and could become easily involved in the project, and also at a scale where finance could be meaningfully engaged. And all of that needs to happen also taking into account the environment. So is the project built around a common waterway where all farmers are drawing water and discharging water into that common waterway, and therefore have correlated disease risk and correlated impact on the cumulative environment. So what does the program do? At its core, it's about coordinating across those stakeholders that I mentioned, specifically building enabling conditions and capacity for improvement. And a large part of that in the beginning of the project has been developing a roadmap for improvement. So this involved matching local priorities with international best practices to create a vision for where the sector wanted to go, including different activities and different goals for improvement across the region. And this roadmap, which was co-developed with lots of different stakeholders, really spells out who does what, by when, in a time-bound process to lead the sector towards more sustainable production at the scale of the whole Regency. And importantly, you can audit progress against this roadmap, given that it's time-bound, given that it has specific details and goals. We also added an additional layer of incentives to the project by working with IDH, ADM Capital, and Alun Aquaculture to build an investment vehicle to further support improvements in the area through financing. And this is called the Asia Aquaculture Facility. It's a targeted $10 to $20 million fund that can scale up to 100 million. And the idea is to use revenue-based financing, meaning farmers who don't necessarily have a lot of standing assets to borrow against can take on loans to support infrastructure improvements. But specifically, it works synergistically with the Shrimp Improvement Program, and that the things that the Shrimp Improvement Program does, the building out of the roadmap, the execution of the roadmap, de-risk the investments for the financial institution. And at the same time, the investments in the form of small loans also drive improvement amongst small farmers. And so really at a large scale, the Shrimp Improvement Program is about testing a new model where we're engaging in policy, we're engaging markets to drive improvement, and we're engaging with finance to further drive improvement at the whole jurisdictional scale of the Banyuwangi Regency. And I'll end with this slide and save lots of time for questions. But I wanted to end with this slide just as a teaser. You'll learn much more about the process of jurisdictional approach aquaculture improvement projects in later webinars. But I wanted to show this just to highlight that beyond just developing a roadmap and executing on that roadmap, there are many steps in the process. There's different phases that we've outlined as scoping, co-design, implementation, and improvement. And in Banyuwangi for the Shrimp Improvement Program, it's taken almost 3 years to get through scoping and co-design. It's sort of a lot of building strong relationships between different stakeholder groups. Importantly, especially when talking to retailers and others in the supply chain, one of the biggest benefits or opportunities is that there are indicators at each step in this process, in addition to indicators in the roadmap. And these are all benchmarked against international best practices and sustainability standards. So there's ways for supply chain companies retailers to engage and really audit and monitor progress in the improvement program. And I'll stop there and open it up for questions.
Dane, thank you very much. That was quite inspirational. In fact, I think what I got from your presentation is almost that the landscape-based management and the starting of AIPs is a shift in paradigm, because with certification, we're focusing on a few big farms who already have the resources to improve, that most likely are already part of the improvement journey. Or if not, they are supplying a big processing plant with the resources, they're already exporting. So it's in a way, it's the upper part of the farmer side, and they already have what it needs for improving. But with this model, we are shifting, so you are able to make the resources available to those farmers who just don't have the means to start improvements on their farm. You can't just ask them to change infrastructure. Resources are needed, and this is basically the only improvement models that is able to unlock these resources. I think this is really, really important. But yeah, we're open for questions. So if you guys have any questions, put them in the chat box, or just take the microphone and ask any of the panelists if you would like anything to be clarified.
And on that note, regarding questions, there's been a few in the comments. We've had, are there any examples of areas where regional management is working? And I'll just draw everyone's attention to, it's in the shared comments. There's a link to a site called Source Up, where you can get more information. So thank you, Lisa, for sharing that. There's also a comment about, it's more about terminology, really. So we hear phrases like landscape approach and jurisdictional approach, and I was just wondering whether there are any specific definitions attached to those two terms, or is it more of the sort of, it's the area-based coordinated and focusing on cumulative impacts approach, or is there a specific definition that divides jurisdictional from landscape, or is it just, are the equivalent basically?
I would like to answer.
Yeah, I'll give it to Dane as the more academic amongst us, but I guess in the strictest sense there would be landscape would be based around a geographic boundary. Jurisdictional is perhaps more kind of socio-political, but broadly we're looking at an engagement at a functional scale. So we can't necessarily engage whole countries, and I think we've made the case that engaging individual farms is not creating change at the pace that we would like. But if we can engage at a local government scale, as Dane referenced in his presentation, I think that gives us a very effective way to engage both government and producers.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That there isn't, to my knowledge, a unifying source that defines all these different terms that kind of get at the same thing. But one thing that I think will come out in time with solidified definitions is sort of the importance of working at a broader multi-farm scale, whether that's defined by political jurisdiction or the ecosystem or other factors, on a specific commodity like shrimp aquaculture. But then more of a seascape approach, or whatever the term ends up being, is thinking about a discrete spatial area that includes spatial management and focusing on multiple commodities in that area, and sort of how you align all of them for sort of a more holistic economy-wide vision for sustainability. So no clear definition, but it's going to need to get more complex than just shrimp aquaculture.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. It's like working. It's progress. There's a few other questions here. I've got one here. What short-term incentives can AIPs offer to Indonesian shrimp farm owners to implement sustainability changes in their farms if access to foreign markets through certification isn't feasible? And this is because certification isn't possible due to land availability issues. Yes, so incentive AIPs can offer in shrimp farmers.
I think one of the most obvious incentive that an AIP can offer is building the capacity of farmers in terms of improving their farming practices. It's true that it's quite hard to find market that would accept products coming from an AIP rather than from a certified product. So for us, what we are trying to promote is the most immediate benefits that they can get from participating in an AIP is for them to improve their farming practices and minimize their impact to the resources surrounding them.
Thanks, Jack. I can, if anyone would like to unmute themselves and ask a question, then feel free to do so.
Paul, I would like to say something else about the first questions who asked about clarification between landscape and jurisdictional. And I just wanted to ask the panelists what they thought about how, I've been working on this concept for some time now, and I wonder, is it even important for someone from the industry to really understand this difference? Or could it simply be that all we need to understand is that it's a group of farms, it's something larger than one farm, and basically spend more time thinking about getting started instead of getting it perfectly right and aligned with the theory? So, you can spend a lot of time going around drawing map and making sure that you account for everyone. But in the end, I think as long as you have a group of farms that share some natural resources, they can start collaborating, I think.
It's interesting, Elena, because where we've started some of these projects, it hasn't necessarily been with all producers. I think we need to be clear on that aspect. The engagement in on-farm improvements has typically been with a group of producers or a subset of producers within the area, and also with the club or cooperative or the association in that area as well. I think Jack's model is interesting as well through Itiatina, because it's reaching a large number of producers, but Jack, you can correct me, I don't imagine it's all of the producers in the area. So you've got that whole mix of connections. You've got multiple processors. We're working on projects in East Java where we've got multiple processors, multiple buyers, you've got the government, but it's not going to be everybody. And the idea is to start something, definitely, and build that kind of momentum, build some trust, build some understanding. NGOs can come with one perspective, and obviously the supply chain comes with another, farmers with another, governments with another. As Dane explained, it took 3 years in Banyuwangi to reach that kind of common ground and an actual agreed work program. And still there will be challenges as we go forward in implementing it. But like any improvement effort, I guess, in fisheries as well, you've got to start somewhere, get the ball rolling, and hopefully then more people see the value and come along.
It almost sounds like, when you want to start a fishery improvement project or a certification where you're not going to include all the vessels in the fleet, basically. It can just be some of the vessels that are fishing that stock.
So I think, this will be talked about a little bit more, I think, next week, and when we talk about the process of a jurisdictional aquaculture improvement program. But before a project begins, there's scoping that involves examining what the enabling conditions are present or not present. So sort of who are the key stakeholders? What is the local area's vision for improvement? How far away are they from something like a BAP standard? What percentage of farms meet that, et cetera. So those sorts of exercises at the beginning of a project, coupled with the roadmap, which is time bound, I think can de-risk involvement by retailers in improvement, especially with improvement amongst lots of different farmers. But the major upside that didn't necessarily come out in this conversation is that because the farmers in an area are drawing water and discharging water into common water bodies, in the case of shrimp farming, their disease risk is correlated. And so if you only source from certified farms in that water body without focusing on what the other farms are doing on that water body, your certified farms are still exposed to that high disease risk if the other farms aren't acting in, if they're not using best practices. And so if you're thinking about long-term supply from the farms you source from, it improves the overall stability and resilience to focus on all the farms in a water body and how they can work together to reduce disease rates, than focusing on individual farms and certification. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dane. Yes, absolutely. I'm sure everyone has seen how farms that were certified for years, they still were heavily impacted by any disease outbreak that happened in the area.
Could I ask a question, if I may? So I'll just introduce myself as well. I'm William Davies. I work at the Big Prawn as Sustainable Sourcing and CSR Manager, but I'm also the current Shrimp Roundtable Chairman, Industry Chair. So the issues about environment, disease, carbon footprint, and so on are things that we discuss on that forum. And I can see a number of members on that on the group today. It was very interesting, the three presentations today, and of different jurisdictions, and talking about the government involvement. I was going to, my question today was, how are you also linking that up with maybe government departments that are responsible for export and kind of marketing the seafood from those areas? And the ones that were highlighted in the presentation were more the kind of regulatory ones and the environmental ones.
In the certainly in the work in Indonesia, we've engaged the Indonesian Shrimp Forum Udang Indonesia, which is made up of multiple agencies, including those that export, and it includes the processor associations. And I know that they are working broadly on branding. So the idea to increase the positive brand for Indonesian shrimp in the international market, I'm sure you're aware of it. But engaging them has also helped because they message down through the supply chain about the broader need to increase the reputation of shrimp from Indonesia. So the project is contributing to that through the improved demonstration of good practice, and getting more farms to comply with the local national standard as a strong stepping stone towards perhaps broader international certification for the farms that can get that far as well.
Our AIP leader as well in South Sulawesi is heavily involved in that activity on creating branding for Indonesia. We have reviewed the SOPs that they have developed and try to incorporate some of the requirements that our AIP is being implemented to ensure that the process that we are doing in our AIP will be taken as well by a larger community in Indonesia.
Thanks, that's great.
I'll pop back to the question that Paul last read out from the chat as well, which was about the kind of value for Indonesian farmers, even if they're not exporting. And I think we've touched on these things. Dane brought it up as well for sure. But you know, if issues around disease management or environmental management are addressed holistically through an AIP, the idea is, as well as improving kind of reputation and market access, is that it will also reduce the risk for producers who aren't necessarily reaching those export markets, but you know, still suffer when there is a disease or a challenge because of local water quality and have additional production costs because they have to clean up the water before they use it. So I think that the value is there for farmers who might feel that they don't need to be actively engaged because they don't have that direct support of a processor that you explained earlier, Elena, as well. But one of the other things that we've been piloting is access to a diagnostic service. In East Java, there's one government laboratory. Farmers can access private laboratories if they have a good relationship with a feed company that has a laboratory. But we've been working with Jala, a small local data tech company, to pilot the idea of developing a diagnostic service as well. I think all of these are value adds to the industry as a whole, regardless of who engages. I know there are concerns about free riders, but the whole thing improves the economics, the reputation of the industry as a whole, both for farmers and for the whole supply chain.
Thank you, everyone. I've got a couple more minutes, so if anyone else would like to ask a quick question, then feel free. If not, I have a quick question for the panel. So we are hearing more and more about AIPs. So, we used to, I remember just hearing mostly about FIPs, but then AIPs are coming to the fore, aquaculture improvement projects. So I was just wondering, what's the sort of market acceptance of AIPs? Are they part of supply commitments by retailers and seafood companies? Do you have any insights on that?
I'll just jump in. I don't think there are many AIPs out there. Also, just terrible acronym. But going back to that, the sort of the webinar that will be the next one. As long as there's an auditable structure that can provide retailers confidence in time-bound improvement, I think that de-risks an improvement project a lot. But there are retailers who have committed to sourcing from certified producers, as well as producers that are undergoing improvement through an AIP. But each one at this point is different. Each AIP is different.
Yeah, thank you, Dane. And also in the UK, there is something called the Sustainable Seafood Coalition, which is basically a coalition of all businesses that have some involvement with seafood. And what they do is they set some guidelines on what is sustainable and what is responsible and which word you can use. And one of the things they say, the Sustainable Seafood Coalition, is that products from aquaculture improvement projects should be allowed and under the label of responsible seafood. But like you say, provided that there is an auditable trail of improvements and what it is that they're achieving. So yeah, absolutely. The concept, the power that they have is very big, and they are big projects, but they can be tracked just like any big project through very basic project management rules. So improvements can be tracked. This is something that was done even when you're working with a group of farms towards certification. The concept isn't that different from that. Okay, if there aren't any more questions, I would like to close this session. And yeah, so thank you very much to the panelists today who took the time to work with us, work with the Sustainable Fisheries Partnership to build these stories and prepare these presentations and be here with us today. Also, a very big thank you to SFP staff for helping us with the infrastructure to run this Zoom webinar. And thank you to the Asian Farm Shrimp Supplier Roundtable and members such as the Big Prawn Company for supporting and sponsoring part of this webinar. We're going to run a second one, which is going to focus on how to get started with this kind of projects. And that is going to be on the 7th of November. So I hope to see you there. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.